First of
There you go.
all, my name is Sam. That's Brian.
Sam,
We are Red River
Brian.
Podcast. We
Yeah.
talk music, we talk movies, we talk pop culture. And
Yeah.
when I tell you, you you are one of the people that we wanted to have on, and we just never thought that we would ever ask. I can't even, I can't even tell you what your music and your playing has meant to us growing up to this day. So thank you so much for taking the time.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you. No,
Cool.
it's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bienvenido. Bienvenido.
Okay.
So I really
is this a radio audio only, or is
we
this
just
visual
take the
too?
audio off it with just
Yeah,
video,
okay.
just so we can converse better,
I do the same thing
Yeah.
with my show on 6 Degrees of Sarzo once it's on Rock Radio,
which is fantastic, I must add.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Love
Thank you.
it.
Really
Appreciate
enjoying it. I
Okay.
just wrapped the
Thank you.
Brad Gillis episode, and
Brad, yeah.
It's so
Cool.
good. We'll jump around a little bit here, but I love that it's kind of like a classic radio show. It reminds me of, because you get the interview and then you pull there's music clips of exactly what you were talking about. So it's great for the listener.
Are we rolling?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Great. I mean, no. So I can answer your question and not save it for later on, because we're actually rolling now.
Rolling.
Yeah. I wanted to create something that I grew up with, which was radio, AM radio in the 60s. The feeling of coming home from school, and there's a DJ, very famous DJ in Miami named Rick Shaw, and he would announce, "We're going to play the latest Beatles single." And it was, at 3:00, and everybody's sitting at the same time in front of the radio, waiting for that song to come on that we had no idea what it was going to be like. And then they'll play like "I Am the Walrus." And you're like, holy shit, what did I just hear? And you're like scratching your head as you're listening to it, trying to like get as much information as possible, because it wasn't even in the stores yet. So it wasn't like you could go out there and buy it. So it's like, then you have to wait for the next time that they play, because they'll hook you in, then they'll play advertising and all of that on the radio. But I wanted to recreate that, which actually it creates a frequency, especially with the global broadcast, having people listening at the same time, feeling an emotion, a collective consciousness that is created. It's like, when was the last time that you drove down the freeway and you looked over to the next car next to you, and let's say Phil Collins, Something in the Air Tonight, bum, 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 is playing, and who's tuned into the same station, because everybody's doing that, just like you are. That collective consciousness, it's really missing nowadays, because even though I enjoy the accessibility of music, real time to hear that, there's something to be said about tuning in, because that's what you're doing. You're tuning in to a consciousness that is collective within the people that share the same tastes and frequency as you do.
It's amazing to like hear you on that, because I feel like through the bands, you're always like the rhythm section, like you're in the background, but I feel like I think you even have like a major in communications, right?
Yes, but then it's according to perception. Your perception is let's say it's 3D perception, because like if we're in the background, that means that there's a foreground or even a third dimension to it. So let's say we're in the 3D, right? I look at it as your background, what you consider the background, is actually the ground rhythm section. It's at the very ground of the music. I think of it vertical, like stacks, like notes on top. And so I look at, it's interesting that your perception is that we are the background, which means that our ground all of a sudden becomes the back, more of the horizontal. We become the horizon. I put it this way: the ground is the horizon, because we're flat, and yours is more like the vertical, like the wall, like that second dimension.
Well, it's yeah. Like I said, I'm glad that you, more than a lot of people, you've taken to the world of podcasting and broadcasting, like we just mentioned. You know, I'll always bring up listening to you on Uncle Joey's podcast, where like I was like, oh shit, I'm like Joey got Rudy Sarzo, and from there, like I transformed from really appreciating the music that you've been a part of to just the personality and your opinions. And then from there, you know, you started doing the dash. And I think it's so important to capture these conversations, because I listening to your Frankie episode, I think is so important, because you like, it's such a time capsule that you can go back and listen to this, you know, friend that you've had such a rich history with, and it's always going to be there. So I love that you do that.
Thank you so much. You know, you know what you guys are doing and what everybody else is doing, documenting an oral history of people, not just musicians, but people in general. When I started out with a dash, and to answer your question, well, I'm sorry, like 10 minutes ago, yes, I do have a background in mass communication. That was my subject in college. I was inducted in the Miami-Dade College Hall of Fame last year, 2020.
Nice,
and
nice.
yeah, so you know, it's always been a passion for me. It's music is part of the human experience, and the human experience is, of course, mass communication is such a big covers so much ground about the human experience, because it's about that communication and sharing. And what you're doing and everybody else is doing, podcast documenting an oral history of individuals. You know, I started out with the dash, my show, the dash. It wasn't even a show; it was just a podcast. There was no music. To me, a show has to have a little bit of music in there, you know. And so I started with the dash, and I call it the dash because I started attending services for, I'd say, Ronnie James Dio, Lemmy, Jimmy Baines, you know, bandmates and colleagues. And everybody was saying all these wonderful things about the individual. And I thought, wouldn't it be nice if they would be here to hear that, to listen to that? So when I started doing the podcast, it was called the dash because it's that line between, in a headstone, between birth date and death date. It's life. That's what's important to me about that. How big is that dash? You know, how well lived is that dash? And to have, you know, people be able to document that in their own words. I did 2 of them with Frankie. I did the Dash podcast with him, and that was the first one. And then when Harlan Henriksen, the CEO of Monsters of Rock, which I got some great memories of playing Monsters of Rock festival in England, Donington, with Whitesnake in 1990, and you know, the cruises and everything. So it's a brand that I really trust, and I really appreciate when he offered me to bring the podcast into a radio show format for Monsters of Rock Radio. I just jumped right in, and ironically, it's on the Dash Network. So you know.
Yeah, that's so awesome. And it's funny that you say a brand you could trust, because Monsters of Rock, like growing up, so like I'm 43, so like anytime we were MTV kids, so we would watch these like gigantic shows that were taking place, but they were like not anywhere near like Long Island, New York. So we would be like, oh shit, like we can't wait to go. But now these shows now live on YouTube. So like sometimes like I'll put them on and I'll be like, oh man, here's Quiet Riot at like the Day on the Green and stuff like that, you know.
Oh, the S Festival. Yeah.
Like how you know, it's another way. It's like just amazing that these things live on. And I don't know if you ever go back and watch you know, like if you're like skimming through YouTube, I mean, do you ever like just put that on just as a memory?
That's interesting. I use it as a be able to plug into certain consciousness that with different bands. By consciousness, I really mean, and I don't know if you guys, you know, have ever thought, are you guys musicians? Are you in a band situation? Yeah. Okay.
Not anymore, but
so, okay. Well, I mean, yeah. So you guys understand this, you know, any band that becomes successful is because even before success appears and it's a reality, because you focus on it long enough, you work hard enough that it becomes a reality. Before that, there's a consciousness that the reason why all of us were together in a band is because of the music. That's it. It has nothing to do with anything outside of that thought. Music, right? And I like to listen to bands that live recordings that were captured while that consciousness was pure.
Oh, yeah.
Pure. We're all here because, and so yes, I do go back and revisit that because there's a certain energy that exists and in that moment that might never get recaptured unless there's a collective effort by every single individual to refocus on that consciousness that led the band to success and led the band to connect. See, the reason why bands become successful is because, let's say, AC/DC. AC/DC has a collective consciousness that you can wear an AC/DC t-shirt and you walk down the street and people are going to connect with that. And they're going to see you completely different than they would see you if you were wearing, just the plain white t-shirt.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's so true. My people.
Yeah. And all of a sudden, you're trustworthy. All of a sudden, you have a certain element about you, even though the person that looks at you might have never met you before, but there's a trust factor, there's a connectivity factor with you, just because you happen to embrace a specific musical consciousness. And I see this more than in politics. You rarely see anybody, if ever, probably maybe during elections, some political t-shirts. No, you see rock band t-shirts.
Yeah, no. I mentioned that it's a weird thing.
Yeah. Well, no, it's not weird. It's and I'll explain to you because I study this and I can give you my perception, which is not weird. It's something that it just does. It's not because it might get overlooked. It gets overlooked because like breathing gets overlooked. How often a day do we think about, hey, we're breathing? Oh, so let me maybe do it right. Or no, we just breathe. And music, we just listen to music. We don't even think about it. We just go automatic. It's not that we're programmed to do that. No, I think it's because it's such a fundamental need, just like breathing and eating. We eat because we don't even think about it. I'm hungry. I'm going to eat. There's no question about it. It's no thought, So listening to music, resonating with that frequency is part of our human experience, So connecting with that logo, with that consciousness, it's something that again goes back to what I was talking about. You create this massive collective experience that people gravitate towards, and it's the same experience as when you stand on stage. You play, let's say, in front of 10,000 people. I have never thought of like, I wonder how many are of this political party, how many are of that political party, and where are they mingling? Or are they, because what we're doing, no matter what our thought is outside of that experience of coming to a live show, is that what we have one purpose is to resonate with the music that whoever's playing on stage is giving us. Is projecting through the PA, the huge PA system, because as you know, what's happening on stage it has very little to do with what the house engineer is actually
you're
mixed
right.
there, and you get that mix.
You're right. That's why you're like, wait, does this sound good? I mean, when we play, because when I play local, we always look out. We're like, does that sound good?
We don't know. We only know that we're making music and then it's being amplified. It goes through massive amplifiers to project that, right? Yeah. Because you want to reach as many people as possible. Like the worst experience you could really have is to stand in front of the stage. Because first of all, nowadays you don't hear, a lot of the bands are playing, just direct into some kind of an emulator or something. And then if you stand back, actually, if you're around the area where the engineer is, that's where you want to be, because that's the best sound, right? That's the sweet spot.
Sweet spot
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah. So
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the things that I wanted to bring up to you was, you're talking about music being a unifier. So growing up, like you came from Cuba, and to me, like you are the epitome of like the American success story. Like you came and you transcended like any ethnicity or anything like that. You're part of the American fabric now. Like when people know Rudy Sarzo, they know music, and it's beyond like anything. It's such a like universal language, and I know just recently you put out a song called Tears of an Immigrant. Can you just give us like a rundown as to how that came about?
Yeah, how it came about. The word immigrant has gotten such a both a positive and a negative connotation. It's just because it can be, when you're talking about fundamental human rights, the right to be free. Freedom should have no political agenda. Freedom is freedom. Because it's not about politics. You could have, you could be living in a country that allows you freedom, but still have what would be the opposite of freedom? Because I hate to use the word slavery. It's such an ugly word, even though I am not ignoring the fact that slavery exists or has existed in many different, permutations, but it's such an ugly word that I just rather, okay, so when you're free and then when you're not free, what would you consider that? Oh, under a totalitarian government, let's say, or totalitarian, regime, or whatever you want to call it. It's everybody has the right to be free. And my family came to the United States, and we came here in between the Bay of Pigs. We were in Cuba during Bay of Pigs, and then we came to Miami, and then the missile crisis happened. And a lot of people are not aware of what the missile crisis, the October missile crisis was. And in a nutshell, and this is documented for many decades, almost 6 decades, the fact that the Cuban government allowed Russian nuclear missiles in the island, and they were aimed 90 miles away from the United States, Key West, right? And that's what triggered the embargo. Now, the embargo is actually what it prohibits. It's some companies, not all of them, but because the United States gives humanitarian relief and to Cuba when the time is when it's necessary, or when the Cuban government accepts it, because a lot of times they don't want that assistance. And also the U.S. government allows families or anybody from the United States to send money to Cuba. That's not an issue. What the embargo does is prohibits Cuba as a communist country becoming a favorite nation, which means that once you become a favorite nation, just be like many other countries in South America, Central America, and the Caribbean, they get financial money. They get money, taxpayer money, given to them, actually to the Cuban communist, government. And that's what the embargo stands for. But, the United States gets most of their goods from China. If you walk into Walmart, everything is made in China. There's no embargo on Cuba buying goods from China or any other country, Canada, Mexico, the rest of the world. So that's what the embargo means, in reality. And it was there, just, John F. Kennedy put it in place to retaliate against, having those nuclear missiles. So, talking about the whole immigrant experience, I just wanted to tell you about what it was. My family gave up everything for freedom. You can't buy freedom. You can buy food, you can buy necessities, but you can't go to a store and buy freedom. Freedom is something you you have to fight for it somehow, some way to get it and then to keep it, you know. And I learned that at a very early age. So so my making the video and writing the song was just as a tribute to my parents, and then by being a tribute to my parents, is tribute to every family that would sacrifice everything to raise their children in freedom.
Yeah, I love the song. Very catchy. You know, come on, come on, come on. It almost even had like a tinge of like Bowie in there too. You know,
it's actually I'm sorry because of my accent. It's actually how long.
Oh, how long? Okay.
How long? But you know, with my accent.
To us, hey, listen, to us, it's all melody. You know, so like,
exactly.
Yeah, for sure. The melody like stuck out too. So, and I'm first generation, man. You know, my dad's Colombian, my mom's Dominican. So yeah.
Oh wow.
Awesome. But yeah, Langan.
Yeah. I'm happy to say I read your fantastic book, Off the Rails, which I highly recommend to anyone who hasn't. It's available everywhere, chronicling your time in Ozzy and Quiet Riot and your relationship with Randy Rhoads. I was wondering if you could talk about, going back to your early days, getting to LA at 27 via Cuba, Miami, New Jersey, and you end up in LA. If you could talk about what the Strip and the scene was, talking about collective consciousness like before, what the Strip was like at that time.
Yeah, it was a mixture of collective consciousness and competition. Competition breeds champions.
Yeah,
I truly believe in you know, friendly competition. I mean, you see boxers beat each other up, and at the end of the fight, they hug each other, because without that great opponent, you're not going to rise to the occasion.
So true, yeah.
You know, and that's what sports is based on. You know, that one guy moving a little puck from this here to there, you know, and it's that you know, years ago I read a book. I keep forgetting the title, but basically what I got out of it is the difference between men and women. You know, men, according to this book, and it's something that I do gravitate to this consciousness. The consciousness of being a man is to challenge each other. We challenge each other. Our best friends will challenge us at a very early age in school. You know, that's how we start. In the playground, we get challenged, and they say, yeah, I like this guy. He gets the best out of me, you know, and you become pals, and you might be like musicians. You like, one guy learns one chord and you like, teach me that. And I said, no, you got to figure it out for yourself. And then you do, you know, stuff like that. Yeah. And women will test you. My favorite teachers in school were female because they were always testing me. My mom taught me what my teachers were not capable of teaching me in such limited amount of time. My mom could, like, after school, when I was done with my homework, she would teach me and test me. She's not challenging. She's sharing information, and then she's going to test to make sure that I retain that. You know, girlfriends, when you're a kid, the first thing they want to know, do you love me? Yes, I do. Well, show me. You know, so they're testing you, and you know, your whole life you're going to be tested by females because they want to make sure that you, according to what their knowledge that they're sharing with you, because women know things, they're better survivalists than we are. You know, because I think that they're smarter than we are. They look at things from a whole different angle. And for years, I did not understand that. I was more like, why can't my girlfriend or my wife be more like me, you know, or think like me? And then I said, wait a minute, we're not supposed to. It's a whole different thought pattern. You know, we're wired different, you know. Wow. And I'm talking about the traditional thought of consciousness of male and female.
Yeah. That's funny.
Yeah, because I don't want to offend anybody out there.
Nah, but yeah, I've had that thought too. Like, you know, it's like I've had that conversation, and to me, I'm thinking like, why can't she just be rational like me? She's just like, that is so funny that you know. But yeah, you, like just growing up, like you said, once you get to the Strip, it's just like so many bands were made there, and I think like when you really think about it, like what was like the heyday, like the very beginning was like probably like 82, because it was even after like Ozzy, like the whole, like once you joined Ozzy, like when do you feel like the Sunset Strip really took off or started, nurturing?
Yeah, when I got there in the 70s, it was already buzzing. Yeah, the Sunset Strip has always been buzzing. I mean, if you look at the 60s with the whiskey, with every great iconic band playing that iconic today, they played at the whiskey as some kind of a brand new act. Anybody from AC/DC to Led Zeppelin to Jimi Hendrix to the Doors, who were the house band,
Yep, sure.
And then Quiet Riot later on with Randy, we played there, and it was always buzzing as far as when the existence of the Strip as a rock and roll scene, because originally it was more of the Sinatra crowd, like playing at Ciro's, and then Ciro's became a rock club, or I think it's a comedy store now. So it went through different changes as the consciousness, and I keep saying consciousness because I believe that's what it's all about. You call it the mentality, the mindset, what brings people together to one place. I mean, the reason why I traveled to LA is because that's the consciousness that I wanted to be a part of. Plus the weather was much better than anywhere else, but I figure, this is where the music scene is. And if I'm going to get into a great band like I did with Quiet Riot, or if I'm going to let people know that I exist, because unless you make yourself visible and are part of that consciousness, you do not exist.
And fads like music comes and goes, and you saw, like, let's say disco, and then you saw punk rock. So did you, like, when you're knee deep in something like disco, do you ever feel like it's ever going to go away? Do you feel like this is just the way it is? Same thing with punk.
Okay. See, the music does, in my opinion, this is my perception. I'm going to explain it to you. And of course, you have your own perception and you can explain it to me, and there's no argument. That's the way you see it. And this is the way I see it. The way I see it is, it's consciousness, right? Let's say, let's just start with the Beatles, right? The Beatles, 1964 on Ed Sullivan, that was the big bang. Of course, we had Chuck Berry, we have Little Richard, we had Jerry Lee Lewis, we had Elvis, Buddy Holly, which helped create the Beatles' own consciousness. But because of lack of mass communication, and even though all those bands did perform at the Ed Sullivan Show at the time of the 50s, the US government, and I'm not trying to be, conspiracy here. I'm going to give you facts. Okay. Here's what happened. Elvis went to the army, right? Buddy Holly died in a plane crash. Jerry Lee Lewis married his cousin and became like, we're not going to, this guy out of here. Okay. Okay. Little Richard became a minister, and Chuck Berry went to jail. That wiped out rock and roll. It's like they took the pillars of rock and roll and just like, that's right, the temple went down. Okay. So here comes these guys who from Liverpool who were buying records that sailors were bringing in. And another thing is Brian Epstein owned the store NEMS, who became their manager, that brought in those records, right? Those records because there's no radio. I went to England in 1981. There was only 2 or 3 radio stations. You have buttons. You play BBC One, BBC Two, and then something else, right? That's all So it was not like we had rock radio and we can listen to rock and roll. No, it did not exist, right? So these guys brought in this consciousness of the temple or a civilization. If you look at the Mayans, right? Let's say, for example, you go to Aztec or Mayan ruins, there's a temple there, and there was a consciousness there that kind of like went with the ruins. So these guys tap into that because the music is like finding relics. Oh, these guys made these records, like say Chuck Berry, but he's not touring anymore because he's in jail and he can't tour, whatever. but we got the music, we got the records. We're going to play his songs. So we're going to keep the music alive. And from doing that, right? Whether it's Little Richard, who is not even making records anymore because it's a minister, or Jerry Lee Lewis, it's like, with his cousin, all that. But the music remains. Okay, so you take that, you build that. And then all of a sudden, just when you thought rock and roll had disappeared and is dead and it's gone, boom, Beatles on Ed Sullivan, the Big Bang. That changed everything. It's because my generation, I was 13 years old. I was entering puberty. Right? And I see these girls in the audience. See, if the camera would have never panned to the girls, it might have been a whole different experience because just four dudes playing some music, right? But once the camera goes to the girls, you go, holy shit, I want that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So then all the kids in my school, we're all going through puberty. And all of a sudden it's like, hey, if you wanna make the girls scream in your school, you're gonna comb your hair down, right? And you're gonna look like a Beatle or act like a Beatle. And all of a sudden it's now, wait a minute, that's not enough. We have to make music. We have to make music like the Beatles do, So then that was like the Big Bang, And then 5 years as I'm entering being a teenager, past puberty, in comes Led Zeppelin and Jimi Hendrix. I go, we're serious now here. This is not just teenage puberty here. This is like manhood. This is what men play and sound like, and this is what they sing about. It's a whole different consciousness now, right? Plus, there is the Doors, the dark side of life. Because my generation, the same way that went through puberty with the Beatles, now we do that daily walk to the mailbox. See if that draft letter came in. Wow. To go to the draft, to go to Vietnam. Right? That's my generation.
Wow.
Yeah. Some of my friends went to Vietnam, some did not make it. I'm blessed that I did not have to see war in my lifetime. Witness it, be part of it, become, do that. I respect those who did and gave their lives, and I honor that. But a lot of them did not make it. That was my generation. My generation lived every day like there's no tomorrow. Because a lot of my friends did not have it tomorrow. So you go through that. Vietnam War ends. You get disco. Right? Almost immediately. You go from like Led Zeppelin to Yes to Kool and the Gang, basically, right? Because actually it was a celebration of liberation, of not having to worry about that, live life like there's no tomorrow, because now you were doing that without the threat. It was a celebration of living life that there's no tomorrow, rather than living life that like there's no tomorrow, because you might be shipped off to Vietnam and you might die, right? So the party continues, but for a whole different reason, right? And it was a lot of liberation, especially if you look at the liberation of the gay movement that came out of New York, Stonewall. I was living in Florida at the time. And we went from being able to play in rock clubs to the next day, the club owner would come with a new set list of songs that he wanted to hear, and they were all dance disco songs. Because they looked at it and say, "Wait a minute, we sell booze here. How can we make people drink more? They dance more, they sweat more. Don't play Freebird because people are going to stand there watching you play guitar rather than to dance to the music and sweat. This is not a concert.
So true.
It's not a concert hall. This is we're in the business of selling booze here. Okay. So everything became disco. Now, for me as a bass player, some of the greatest bass lines came out of disco. But
so good.
I'm a rocker, and I do appreciate being able, having played those bass lines. But at the end of the day, my consciousness is I'm a rocker because to me, rock is rooted in blues, and blues is the music of freedom, right? And freedom and hope and all of that. And so that's why I play rock. You know, I could have played salsa, I could have played anything like that. But to me, in my consciousness of what salsa music like that means, it's kind of like, you know, keep the people dancing and drinking,
Yes.
and they're not gonna, you know, and they'll be satisfied, which is
my dad, like whenever I play, I like send him. He stopped saying it because I'm so old now, but like he would always be like, "That sounds good, but can you throw some like congas in there?" And I'm like, "But I'm like, we're like a punk rock band, which means nothing which means nothing to my dad, you know." But he was like, "Yeah," he's like, "That's cool." He's like, "But maybe like he has the funniest critiques." But I think he's stopped now. But he just always wanted like Latin influence in my music.
Yeah.
But like I'm like you, like I'm a rocker.
That's the beauty of
Yeah.
music, though. And Rudy, like you have this, you know, funk background. You know, you have a background in that, and then here you have, you know, when you go into Ozzy, Randy Rhoads coming with this classical thing. Yet it all merges into this beautiful symphony, you know. And you guys had, if you could talk a little bit, I know. About playing with him and stuff, because one thing I really enjoyed about the book, because growing up I didn't get to know, it was a little bit ahead of my my era, so I didn't get to know what Randy was like, and you didn't have all this information you do now. So I loved about this book was I learned a lot about obviously you, but him and even Ozzy and Sharon. And if you could speak a little bit about playing
to really put it into in a very big nutshell. Okay, I played with two different Randy Rhoads. I played with Randy Rhoads in Quiet Riot.
Yeah.
And even though getting a record deal for some of us, like let's say Randy, was not really a matter of survival. For me, it was. I mean, I left my home in Miami, kind of like burned the ship. Once I got to LA, I wasn't leaving. I mean, I did leave a couple of times because they kept running out of money. So I went back on the road, but knowing that I was going on the road to make some money in clubs outside of California, so I could make money and come back and continue pursuing, you know. So yeah, in my mind, I have burned the ship. I was not going back to Miami to play disco or whatever, you know, top 40 clubs. I was going to pursue a career with a rock band, original music in Los Angeles. And so that was what Quiet Riot was all about, that consciousness. We're going to get a local record deal, because there was two albums released in Japan. That didn't do anything. That, you know, back in the day, an album in Japan, just like, who cares? You know, people wouldn't even know about it, you know, because it was just for that market, you know.
Why does that happen though, by the way? Like, why, like, is it just like an offer and you're like, fuck it, we'll take it?
Well, we had a manager at the time, and he went to different record companies, and he knew somebody in Japan, I guess, because somehow he got a record deal in Japan.
Okay.
See, what happened with that record deal in Japan, it gave them a budget to make a record so they could actually shop it to other labels in the United States, because it's less of a risk for a record company if somebody shows up with a finished product and they go, here it is, rather than, okay, I like the guys on stage. I'm going to put them together with this producer and these co-writers and this engineer, and hopefully we'll get a good record out of them. We can make our money back. So there's a lot of, you know, unknown territory once you go in that direction. But if somebody shows up, let's say Led Zeppelin 1, which, they recorded the record first, and they went to the record companies and say, here, we got this. You win it. You know, it's a whole different decision than imagining what the final product is going to sound like. So that's what we experienced with Randy. There was a lot of focusing on the consciousness of what Quiet Riot was all about, what it stood for, because it was more like a lifestyle music. Like if you look at Van Halen originally was a lifestyle band. What they sold was the California experience. They were like, if you put together the Beach Boys and the Doors, which did the same thing. The Beach Boys were the biggest marketers of Southern California beach style, lifestyle. And the Doors was more like the darker side, like, if you live on the Strip or in Hollywood, this is what you're going to experience, And Quiet Riot, we were on Van Halen with a blend of both, in my eyes, They could, they had a few songs that touch on the dark side of living, in Hollywood, West Hollywood, and all of that. And like songs like "Ain't Talking About Love." If you listen to the lyrics, there's a lot of about that,
That's an interesting comparison. I love it, by the way. I think it's pretty dead on.
Yeah, but that's what I got from even meeting before I met those guys. They were in touch with the reality of of the pitfalls of living in Los Angeles, surviving basically. And there were very few musicians that I met, especially, let's say, the guys in Quiet Riot, Kevin, Randy, and Drew. They were from Los Angeles. Everybody else that I met were from somewhere else that wanted to be part of what was going on in LA in the 70s, And I got to tell you, it was a single consciousness. Everybody wanted to make it. Everybody wanted to get that record deal. And there was a lot of competition, but you never knew that the guy that the band that you were competing with today, a couple of weeks later, you're going to be in that band. So it cannot be seek and destroy type of attitude. It had to be like friendly competition.
Friendly,
basically.
yeah, for sure. That makes sense.
Yeah. But nevertheless, we knew that, especially towards the end of the 79, after Van Halen got signed, and then they shut the door on rock locally, as far as bands getting signed, and then punk and new wave became the focus. So we knew, and at the same time that we were at Quiet Riot was trying to get that record deal with Randy, there were bands like, there was an incarnation of Rat around. There was a Motley Crue incarnation called London. There was Dokken. There was a incarnation of Blackie Lawless was out there, trying to get a record deal. And so was Great White. So it was basically the same bands that came out of the first wave of the Sunset Strip scene that got record deals in the early 80s after Quiet Riot had the success with Metal Health. So it's that was the Quiet Riot Randy Rhoads that I play with. He was focusing on being a teacher. He loved teaching at his mom's school, Musonia, and also part of the Quiet Riot consciousness of trying to get a record deal. But it wasn't until Randy joined Ozzy that, without having that survival mode that he was in, about, the next song I write with Quiet Riot has got to please the record company, because how long can we keep making demos? How long can you bang your head against the wall to get the acceptance of one person in one label?
Yeah.
Because you just go to one guy, if you're lucky, that he wants to hear, and you go to his office and he's got a desk full of tapes. It's the 70s, so cassettes were very popular then. So you got cassette tapes everywhere, and he hasn't listened to everything. So you could be just another cassette on the file. So you make sure he listens to the song while you're there. Somehow talk him into it. And so once he was not under that pressure, and Ozzy gave him the freedom to be who he was, be himself, that's where all of that came out. All that great music.
How did those worlds cross? Because I don't know, like how Randy ended up meeting Ozzy and
yeah, it's we were still, Quiet Riot was still a band, and this is late 79, almost November, around November, October of 79, and Ozzy had just basically run out of guitar players to audition in Los Angeles, and there was this bass player there is this bass player. He was not in Slaughter at the time, but he was in another band. I think it was called Bad Axe or something like that. And Dana Strum, who was helping Ozzy find local musicians to put together his band. And so Dana kept telling Ozzy, you got to hear Randy Rhoads, man. He's the guy you're looking for. But every time Dana would call Randy would ignore him because, you know, he just wasn't really interested in leaving home, leaving his family, his mom. You know, he was living at home with his mom and his brother, Kelly. And he wasn't interested in that. And he was still, you know, hoping that Quiet Riot would get signed. And it was actually his mom that talked him into, after he got the audition, to actually doing it, leaving California, because she knew that if Randy stayed there, he was just going to burn out, you know, and trying to help Quiet Riot get a record deal because of the industry. So here you have, he's being offered, here, you're going to be the guitar player in a band that already has a record deal with a singer that already has a legacy with Black Sabbath. So it was a no-brainer, really, you know. So she talked him into it, and that's when he joined Ozzy.
Amazing. And after he got it, he came back for you. He was asked about drummers or bass players, I think was the story.
No, actually, Tommy did not have to audition. He already had the gig when I joined. It's Tommy Aldridge, you know. Even 40 years ago, he was still Tommy Aldridge, you know.
Yeah.
And even back then. And so me, I had no resume. I was not just basically. I mean, my reality was I was a guy sleeping on Kevin DuBro's spare bedroom on the floor. Nothing. The only thing I had done at that time is I had been playing with Quiet Riot with Randy in LA. As far as the resume go, things that I could write on the resume,
sure,
you know,
yeah.
Because I had been playing for over 10 years by then, but that didn't matter. Play with who? No, who cares? So, and I was at the moment, I was currently a member of the band called Angel, but we didn't have a record deal, so nobody cares, you know. So it was, my resume was non-existent. So it was only because Randy kept insisting to Ozzy that I was the guy that they were looking for, even though Sharon had already called me, and I made a bad decision, just like, you know, I shot off my hip, you know, like no, thank you, Sharon. I can't come down to audition because I'm playing with a band called Angel. I'm very happy. And before I could finish my sentence, she hung up on me. And
I get it. I get it though. Like if you're in a band and you believe in your band, you know, like you're like, no, like I'm gonna make it with this band, you know, like these are the songs, these are my guys. I don't want to go play someone else's songs.
That's a collective consciousness that all you guys believe in it.
Yeah.
Everything, you know, once you're all together, I'm not talking about when you guys go home and you have to, like, you know, be aware of your family's needs, that you're still thinking about the band. Yeah, you're thinking about the band, but this is what you're focusing on right now. You're focusing, but as long as you guys are together, there's that consciousness that exists, and that's what you believe in, you know. So I turned it down, and the next day Ozzy called me back, and by then Kevin, who I was living with, had yelled at me and said, "What are you doing? You're crazy. You're sleeping on this floor. You know, you could have played with Randy again," which is one thought that did not come through my mind when I made that stupid quick decision. But I was, Ozzy called me back, and that's when I got the second chance to actually get that one audition. And see, what they were looking for was, you know, of course, you know, somebody who could play the bass, but you know, it had to be somebody who didn't have a drinking problem, or, you know, I wasn't much of a drinker, especially back then, right before I joined Ozzy, and somebody who didn't do drugs, or somebody who could be a decent individual hanging out on the bus, and, you know, things like that. Somebody who was not going to be a bad influence on Ozzy. Yeah. That's what they were looking for. And Randy kept saying, "Hey, Rudy's the guy." Now, if they were looking for a bass player in Cleveland, it would have been a different outcome because they would have gotten somebody locally. But I happened to be the guy who fit those qualifications living in Los Angeles at the time. Yeah.
Amazing.
I do get the vibe that you were kind of the adult in the room a lot of the times in some of those crazy times, with these, there's so many canceled dates and stuff like that. And not to leap ahead, but I mean, when you decided to leave all that, to leave Ozzy, and I'm sure Randy passing obviously had something to do with it, and maybe the chaos got too much, but that must have been a massive decision to leave such a sure thing, to kind of leap into the abyss and go back with Quiet Riot and at that time period.
Yeah, that's a multi-level answer question. Going back to the initial, to your first, mention, is I would say Sharon was the adult in that situation. I was brand new, so I made sure that I was like a child in a room learning. I've always been, put it this way, I've taught myself to be learnable, teachable. It's something that I had to work on, because I can only learn if I pay attention to somebody's sharing something important with me, or the fact that I can look at somebody else's perception from their point of view and learn from that, And so that was my school. Oh my God, about the music industry, just about everything I learned from being in the same bus on tour, watching Sharon run the show. And I say that because our responsibility, our musicians on stage, were to paint the masterpiece every single night.
Yeah.
That's it. Every single show, you could actually put them all on the road. They're basically the same. Not because we were striving for that standard every single night. And we're trying to, like, how can we make this better? So, but it had that consciousness. It had that Ozzy consciousness. It really did. I'm telling you, we knew why we were there. And it wasn't just because of Ozzy's own legacy with Black Sabbath. No, it became something else. The Ozzy consciousness, it covers, well, look at the fan base, right? It connects with the planet. Ozzy can go anywhere in the world and be recognized.
Yeah,
sure.
Because it resonates, right? And how much more can can imagine us being in that, right there in the circle where the energy comes from? We're right there. We're like atoms right there, right, of the band, of what the consciousness of Ozzy represents. We were right there in the middle of it. So we really understand. And no matter what happened, up until the day that Randy died, that Ozzy consciousness remained intact, especially when we hit the stage. It was what people gathered in front of the stage to witness. And while we were traveling in a bus from city to city to deliver. Yeah, there might have been certain things that happened off stage, certain disagreements that Randy did not want to do a whole Black Sabbath record. I wrote about it in my book and all that. Yeah, I'm not denying that. But as soon as we hit that stage, it was that. That's what you got. Right. Once Randy died, it changed everything. It changed everything. That consciousness is almost like I couldn't even find it anywhere. All I could do, I went into survival mode. Every night, I was surviving the show emotionally. So once, see, I have to do a little sidebar here. The reason why I left Ozzy is because Kevin DuBrow asked me to play on a song called Thunderbird for a possible future release of an album. There was Quiet Riot did not exist at the time. It was put on hiatus, and after Randy passed away, that ended Quiet Riot. After Randy left to join Ozzy in 1979. What Kevin kept doing was called Dubrow. And he named it Dubrow because at the time, musicians were trying to survive by doing multiple bands, playing with multiple bands, you know,
Almost
whenever
like,
they could.
like today.
Yeah, to make money. Yeah, it's just like today. Yeah, exactly. And so there was really very hard to get a commitment from anybody. You really have to like really, really, really believe in something, you know. And but I'm just trying to go back to the space and time. So what happened? It was called Dubrow, and I actually, when I moved in with Kevin, I started playing in Dubrow, so I could pay the rent. and he wrote a song called Thunderbird, and I wrote the bass line for that, so I knew the song, and so I joined Ozzy, and then Randy passes away. Kevin calls me to play on Thunderbird, and I walk in and. Here is Frankie Benelli, who I had been playing with Frankie on and off since 1972. That's another story. But nevertheless, a bandmate, it's somebody I grew up with. He taught me how to be a bass player and a rhythm section, all of the above. Frankie was my mentor to his last day. And so here's Frankie, here's Kevin, who of course I've been living with and playing with. And here's Carlos Cavazo, who I knew from the scene locally, he was in a band called Snow. And now what, all of a sudden, what was missing since Randy passed away, which was family. See, once Randy died, to me, the nucleus of the Ozzy family was missing. Because everybody went into mourning individually. We cannot do a collective mourning because we cannot go into that consciousness. We could not take Ozzy down into that place with us. We have to keep everything light, keep it light, keep him going, keep him moving, which is the reason why we went back on tours so quickly, 10 days after the crash, because it was a matter of keeping Ozzy alive, So everything was keep it light. But once I hit the stage, I couldn't help it. I would just go into a deep funk, playing the same set list, the same production, same everything as it was before Randy passed away, but Randy wasn't there. So once I got together with my friends and we played that song, and I go beyond that with my family. That was the family. I found the family again. I found what I had lost a few months before. And anything that you lose, some point in life, you're going to start looking for it.
Yeah. And that song in particular, too, very heavy. I had no idea. I read that, it was a song that he started writing and then finished it by adding a third verse, I guess, because I guess he started writing it originally when Randy left, right?
Well, it was written when I was playing with him. We used to perform that song live. So yeah, he added that, to make it more personal about Randy, and so that song brought me back to playing with what became the mental health version of Quiet Riot. And then we cut it really quickly, and they have booked a longer session. So the producer, Spencer Proffer, and the guys in the band kept asking me, hey, do you remember any of the old songs? Now, by old songs, were one song, Slick Black Cadillac, that wound up on the mental health record, that was actually a Quiet Riot, Randy Rhoads era song that Kevin wrote. So of course I knew that. And we tracked it and did a couple of other songs that were Dubrow songs that I used to play with Kevin that wound up on the mental health record. So by the time I left the session, I had enough of the experience of getting back to a family atmosphere that was missing in my life, that a band to me is a family that you pick.
Sure.
And not that we were not a family in Ozzy, but it was a family in crisis.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how to deal with that, and my survival told me, that sense of survival told me you have to to move on. I could not keep going on stage as a robot,
Right.
emotionally a robot, and just not even feeling the music anymore. There's a big difference about feeling it and not feeling it. And I know when people are not feeling it because I don't feel it when they play it.
Yeah, and the whole, I mean, the whole point of playing music too, right, is to like have fun. Like this is what we love to do. This is what you do, and you know,
and what a decision it turned out to be. I mean,
like
I
right?
mean, you release, you go back, you record Mental Health with Quiet Riot. It comes out. The US Festival time, metal becomes this. I mean, you were right at the cusp of the explosion of metal in the United States. I mean, you must have been like, wow, I guess I made the right call here.
No, I didn't make the right call. I made the only call that I could make if I wanted to keep my sanity and keep the joy of making music, which is the reason why I started to, to go on a career, music career, on the musical path. And it was the only decision I could make, and I was so glad that I made it, for many reasons, but see, I looked at it completely different because I'm aware of the groundwork that before that MTV explosion.
Yeah, MTV for sure.
Yeah, but there was a groundwork that bands like Ozzy, and I would say very few other bands, because there was, with Randy ushered in the new era of shredders, because the last shredder was Eddie Van Halen, and then came punk and new wave. No more shredders, right? So here you have, bam, a new one, Randy Rhoads, and he ushered that, which is one of the reasons why I see him being inducted into a Hall of Fame so fitting, because of his contribution. Without Randy, you might not have 75% of the shredders that came from the 80s era.
Sure. Yep.
Or there would have not been the hall pass that Randy gave guitar players to say, yes, you can play, you can express yourself again, playing guitar the way that you want to, because that's what he did. That's what I witnessed. It was anything that Randy composed and played was because he wanted to. It's not because anybody, being a record company or Ozzy or any other member, management, businesses, anybody told him to play that. That was him, freedom of expression, total freedom of expression.
Well, I didn't, we don't want to keep you too long. I just wanted to bring up a couple of things. I just want to say the work on Slip of the Tongue is that's one of my favorite albums. I feel like, the stuff you did with Whitesnake, do you have any memories of making that record, or like what the writing process was as far as that was concerned, or recording?
Yeah, that was a really interesting process, because when we first started out, Vivian Campbell was in the band, and then there was a departure. He wasn't there anymore. And then, of course, David had written the bulk of the material, except for something like "Fool for Your Loving," which was a cover of an earlier version of the song. I don't know if you can call it a cover if the guy who wrote the song records it again. So a re-recording of his own of a new version, of his own composition. So outside of that, it was all written with Adrian Vandenberg, and then Adrian gets injured during the rhythm section part of the recording process, and then Steve Vai comes in. And I think he did a beautiful job reimagining what Adrian had already played or composed. He gave it his version of Steve Vai, version of the record. And it's one of my favorite things I've ever recorded, just because it was ahead of its time, and you rarely get to record a music that is ahead of its time.
I thought, I agree. I revisited when I knew we were going to have the conversation. And man, when I tell you songs like Now You're Gone, The Deeper the Love, Wings of the Storm, there's some really fantastic, like it's a really great record. And it came out in 89, so I was 11. So to me, like this was part of like almost like the end of like that MTV era stuff before I started getting into like more other stuff. But like I go back and I love this record, and man, I just wanted to salute you on this one.
Yeah. I got a question for you. Now, since you mentioned you're 11, I now this triggers a little, because we're talking about my own personal puberty being with the Beatles. And at 11, did those Whitesnake videos accelerate your puberty?
Yes. So, I mean, rest in peace, Tawny, for sure.
Of course. Sister Tawny,
she was like, growing up, she every time we make a video, my band makes a video, I reference her because she was, I don't know, it's like this, like you said, it's this consciousness of just growing up, these memories of like, anytime we make a video, it's like, all right, now we need someone on top of this car.
Video vixen era. There was her and Bobby Brown.
Bobby Brown. So it was that era. Like I grew up just in enough time to catch a lot of that stuff, and really appreciate. Like I write songs. I'm a songwriter. So I could go back and I listen to these songs, especially like bringing up Bobby Brown. I thought Janie Lane was a great songwriter. There was a lot of people from back then that wrote really great songs, and somewhere along the way, I wanted to bring this back to you, Rudy. Once Nirvana and these bands hit, like, what was your perspective? Because like I feel like there was a lot of bands that kind of like took a dip. They all came back because everyone appreciated now. But what was your perspective around that time, like the mid 90s?
Well, my perspective now, it's different about those times, but my current perspective about those times, which is what I really like to focus on. I like to focus on the now, not on the before. But if I'm going to be analytical about it, I have more information now than I would 30 years ago. So my information now about that time, it was that there was so much clutter of a certain consciousness that generation whose consciousness of the 80s had moved on to something else. There was so much of it. I mean, I remember in 1990 going on tour and everybody went out at the same time. From Kiss to Mötley Crüe to Judas Priest to Whitesnake to blah, 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 everybody. So we were just killing each other because there was only so much money to go around. This is right after the market crash, which had a major effect on the economy, right? So people just could not afford, all of a sudden to buy tickets to watch everybody, So what do you do when something like that happens? You have to kind of like, and this has come even from classical music. Music historically has a way of kind of like, not really destroying, because you just use the platform of the period of music before you, and you build on that. And you keep building on this, right? And what happened was, just like the 60s were not like the 50s, and the 70s were not like the 60s, and the 80s were not like the 70s, the 90s were not like the 80s, and even the 2000s were not like the 90s, So everything, it was a new, fresh consciousness. You have a new generation coming in and saying, we're taking control of MTV right now. So we're going for this, because 10 years later, what you guys have been watching, that's old to us. We were babies. It's our world now, or at least as far as MTV goes, and that's what happened. And that simultaneously with decisions from the inside to stop sending sexual messages to our teens, because now we have an AIDS epidemic.
Yeah.
And we're sending the message of don't, say no to sex. Meanwhile, we have all these video vixens out there, creating all of this, stirring all these emotions in our kids, Yeah, exactly. So how can we do this? Oh, okay. Well, how about if we do this? Now, I'm not saying that this was a something that was created from like decisions made in a boardroom, but it did happen. What happened was somehow, some way, there were no video vixens in grunge videos. None, really, none. But you could find the video vixens in gangster rap. Now all of a sudden you can turn into rap music, and it was all about.
I was watching those too. Yeah.
Yeah, everything that 80s, Sunset Strip videos used to be about. Now it's the gangster rap guys.
Yeah.
And there's something about, humanity and puberty. It's been going on for thousands of years. It cannot be decided by somebody in a boardroom that all of a sudden young males are not going to be seeking hot chicks and videos for whatever reason it might be, but nevertheless, yeah.
But
that was at the core.
And now, things like M3 and Rocklahoma, like I feel like there's more of like a celebration. Like people look back at certain things and they remember those records. Like to me, like I said, even if I was like 10 or 11 around that time, I could still, go back and listen to like all those records. And now I look at it as on a pure, not image, but on a pure songwriting platform. Like I just look at it. It's like, oh, you know what? Take away the videos, take away like the look. From a songwriting perspective, these songs were really well written.
Sure.
Oh yeah, a lot of them were co-written by professional songwriters.
Desmond Child,
and Holly Knight, and Diane Warren, and even Michael Bolton were doing some co-writing and stuff. Yeah.
All right, one last question. Any hearing aid, right? Is that what we're going to ask, Langan?
I would love to. I've never. This is my first chance to ever talk to someone who was participating in hearing aid.
Any memories about hearing aid and?
I was just an accidental participant. There's other people that were really at the core of their contribution to the making of that record. I did get to play with Ronnie.
Yeah.
I was his last bass player in Dio.
Amazing.
So, but we never really talked much about hearing aid because Ronnie, I learned so much from him. I really did. I mean, he was, when I joined the band, I have been doing this for like maybe 25 years. And I thought I had learned everything. And then now I've been doing this for 40 years. And I thought I had learned everything, knew everything about it. And I said, no, Ronnie just taught me a whole new level of humanity and musicianship. Really miss him.
I bet.
It's just amazing. The front men, even Kevin. Kevin was just so powerful. Just like
bigger than life,
like bigger, just completely,
yeah.
like right. And you got to work with a lot of these guys, but I also feel like they got to work with you. You're fucking Rudy Sarzo.
Well, the way I look at it is a joint collective, a collective consciousness. We get to become part of this thing bigger. We should always look at it bigger than the individual because it's the collective that makes the consciousness massive. Because, it starts with 4 guys or 5 guys or guys and girls in a room. Yeah. And then if we really believe that, right, and start spreading out that energy, by playing locally, and then somebody from a record company watches you and say, hey, see, what record companies see when they sign a band is part them liking it, but if the place was empty, there was less chance of that band getting signed than if the place is packed and everybody's vibrating at the same frequency as the band. Then even if the record company guy doesn't get it, it doesn't matter. He sees people getting it. And that's what he wants. It's different if you're the only person who really likes an artist, you sign them, you're gonna be like, well, I like this guy, but nobody's buying their records. Whereas if you sign somebody, let's say Early Poison in LA, it was a no-brainer. For whatever reason, all of these girls used to show up at the shows and be like hardcore fans. Yeah, that band's gonna get signed because it's it's all tangled. It's all connected. If these girls like these guys yet they happen to be in LA, well, as soon as girls in Peoria see these guys, they're going to feel exactly the same way because they're all connected.
We're all connected.
We're all connected.
We're all connected because I'm going to say in the last week, I've been talking about Steel Wheels for some random reason. And me and my friend were talking about Steel Wheels. And I was like, the song Almost Hear You Sigh is like one of the best songs that the Stones ever wrote. So that's funny. I don't know. That's it, man. Thank you, Rudy.
Yeah.
This is like, I don't even feel like we need to ever podcast again. So
no, we could thank you so much for your time. I mean, we could keep
you
forever,
do
but
podcast,
we wouldn't. But I want to tell all the listeners, everyone that listens, check out Rudy's radio and podcast show, 6 Degrees of Sarzo, wherever you listen to stuff. Check out his book, Off the Rails, which I got off of Amazon. It was a great read. I hope you write another book, too, because just like we only scratched the surface of your career here, I would love to hear about the rest of it, you know. But
well, thank you. But no, no, right now I'm concentrating on doing the radio show. I think I can get more documented, you know, especially, you know what I mean? Writing a book takes a long time. If I was going to write the book, I would have to stop doing just about everything else that I'm doing. I bet. And doing a podcast is part of the journey. You know.
And I also want to shout out all the great work you do for animals. I know you're a big animal lover and supporter. If there's any charities you support or would like to mention here, go ahead. And
no, just everybody, please just you support your local shelters. Let's start locally here. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I got two.
Thank you, Rudy.
I got my two here now. So thank you, Rudy. Bye.
Thank you. God bless you. God bless you. Thank you so much.
Mucho gusto.
Mucho gusto.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.